Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Hello, everybody. Hello. Whoa, I scheduled this for like 8:50 my time, local, in the morning. It was not meant to be. I'm so sorry. I didn't know that it was going to be so slow to get to. I was just dropping my kid off. She wanted a ride to school. I don't know why. It's nice today. She could have gotten there the normal way, but I was like, okay. I was up early enough. That'd be easy. Why not? But was I wrong or what? Yeah, she was. There's a construction on the road. Literally yesterday we were on the way. We saw the road and it was fine, no problems. And then oh, good, look at that. So let me see. Yeah, like the road was fine last night, and this morning there's just construction all over the place. They're just doing, I don't know what they're doing. They're doing a lot of stuff on that road. And that's good. San Francisco, where I live, it's famous for, really, really bad roads. Like we don't have public infrastructure investment nearly as much as we should. Hi, Thomas. Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening. Or should I just say Guten Tag? I don't know. That's probably just as good, right? Anyway, that construction. Oh goodness, it took a normal trip 15 minutes. This was 20 minutes at least each way. So I left at 8 whatever, let's say 8:10, and I just got back. I ran back upstairs right now and got on stream, and here we are. Am I going to? I hope so. I sure hope I'm going to spring out. Budget is tough right now, not just for my company, but for all companies. It's in the U.S. I mean, all U.S. companies. Let's see. That's a great question. It's una buena pregunta. I wonder myself, but I'll be at Dev Nexus. That's fun. That's a good show. And if not, well, I'll be here on YouTube. You can find me here. It'll just be us. We'll have a little tiny mini unconference. Your first conference and your talk got accepted. Felicidades, Thomas. That's amazing. Congrats, buddy. That's amazing. It's a great show. It happens to be. It's if you ever get invited to a show in like Spain, just do it. It doesn't matter even if it's like how to write COBOL, cloud native COBOL, or something horrible like that. There's no bad conference in Spain. It's paradise, paradiso. You're gonna have so much fun. But then it's also one of the best shows on the planet. Spring.io is just legit. Hi, Bakir. Good to see you, buddy. Hello again. Hello, hello. Oh my goodness, are we all here? Well, there's some of us. We should get starting. Oh, hey, can I? Oh. Let me see. My goodness. I want to encourage you, my friends, to. Oh, if you like, what people are saying things. Okay. Anyway, the internet. What is the point? I don't know. Like the trick to successful life, I've been told, is just to avoid the internet. And I kind of live on the internet, so it's a bit of a problem. But I believe the people who say that if you get off of it, life is great. It's like take the blue pill, from the Matrix. Okay, friends. Let's just dive right into it. We've got very little time and so much to do. It's already late in the day. Can you DM me? Yeah, sure, buddy. Send me. Can you DM me? That's true for everybody, by the way. If you have, the rest of you, if all of you, just feel free to DM me. I'm happy to help. I mean, about presentations and DevRel, of course, but also Spring. That's the main thing. That's what I'm most talking about. Yeah, feel free to. My DMs are wide open. Don't get me wrong. I'm not super fast at responding, but I will do my level high best. Yeah, I've done a lot of talks. Yeah, I've done literally thousands of presentations at this point, over more than a decade. And most of them were terrible. So don't worry. You'll be okay. Okay, let's see. Where are we, my friends? Today, we're going to continue our journey looking at Spring Boot. And the reason I was ever so confused, just for a second, is because I was let's see, that's also preparing another video on match. I'm revisiting that, and I'm going to do an abbreviated, summarized, version of that, like a very quick crash course video instead of a live coding Let's Code stream series. So, I had to regain my it's in the world here. Idea, build that Gradle. I'm going to share my screen in just a second. Let's just make sure I got the right thing going here. Let's see. Okay, present, share screen, entire screen. Et voila. I think you can see my screen, which is good because I also can see my screen. The font is too big. Hopefully you can all see that still. Yeah, okay. Ooh. Okay, good. Ooh. There you are. Very good. Fantastic. Look at that. So we have our application. Where do we leave off, friends? Yesterday we left off after we've made a journey. We went from no Spring at all and saw how painful that can be and how ugly that would get very quickly. Then we looked at Spring Framework and dependency injection and core concepts like bean factory post-processors and bean definition registry post-processors and bean post-processors. We looked at the Spring Triangle AOP, aspect-oriented programming, the portable service abstractions, the dependency injection. And then we looked at Spring Boot, and we used that as an opportunity to look at how Spring Boot supports events, right? Spring supports events as well, Spring Framework, but I think they just take it to a much nicer place with Spring Boot. So we had that discussion with Spring Boot, and what else did we do? We deleted a lot of code. Actually, moving to Spring Boot was not so much an exercise in writing code. It was about deleting code because everything we had done up until that point, except for maybe our customer service object and our customer record, were just pointless now. I didn't need them. I could just delete them, including all the magic proxy stuff that we did, all the transaction demarcation, all that stuff that we had done to kind of recreate what Spring was giving us. It just went out the window. No need. And I love that, right? That's why I think Spring Boot really succeeds, is because of this last dimension, which we call auto configuration, right? So, and yesterday I talked about what I would like to make a thing, which is the Spring Square, right? So not the Spring Triangle, no more. Instead, the Spring Square. And today, my friends, we're kind of at an interesting junction in our journey with Spring Boot. Today, I think we should probably just talk about web programming. with Spring Boot and kind of understand some of the opportunities there. Obviously, I can't hope to do everything, but we can try. We can try. So what do we want to cover today? I think we should probably just, I don't know, let's just talk about the stuff that's been made available in the order it was made available, roughly, right? So obviously any talk about Spring would be weird if you didn't talk about Spring MVC, so we'll talk about that. Talk about hypermedia, if we can remember how to do that, right? We'll talk about REST. We'll talk about what else do we want to talk about? GraphQL, sure, why not? We could talk about RSocket, although I suspect that might need another module. I wonder if we could do that in this one. We'll talk about WebSockets, lots of stuff, right? Hello, Ahmed. Hello. Hey, everybody. I know, I know you've all got important things you got to be doing. On what is it, the 24th? Let me see. Twitter, Starbucks, man. Where is it? Nope. This one. Here we are, friends. Oh God, all this. I hate ever since the that guy took over Twitter. The things that get recommended to me are just nonsense. So register for our next IntelliJ idea live stream. I'll be doing that 4 to 5 p.m. UTC. What is that, like 8 o'clock? Time in UTC. My watch doesn't understand UTC. Time right now, 5 o'clock. So 4 o'clock. So 5 o'clock is 9. 8 o'clock is 4. Yeah, that sounds about right. So 8 to 9. Basically, when I'm normally doing this, I'll be doing that instead. So join me, not for this stream, which I'm glad you're all here, but join me. Let's go join that IntelliJ idea live stream, okay? On February 24th. It'll be fun. And it'll be me, so we'll be talking about, and in fact, it'll be Spring Boot 3, in fact, right? It'll be you might, if depending on how fast we go with this live stream series. And the nice thing about these live stream series is I can just go into depth, right? I can spend a lot of time talking about everything. But with this, it's just 1 hour. I'm going to do like a 1 hour roving tour of all things Springdom, right? The wide and wonderful world of Springdom. So join me for that, would you? Bookmark it. It's going to be hosted by my friend and fellow Java champion and one of my all-time favorite people, Mala Gupta from JetBrains. And she's a Java champion, and she's written many a book. I'm sure that you've read some of them on, I don't know, what Java certifications, right? Java, different, all the different versions of Java certifications, right? Mala Gupta books. Yeah, OCA, Java 7 certification. Here, she's like super prolific, right? Right. Here's some of her books. There you go. Amazon. Okay, wait. Popular Java 8 certification guide, Java 8, Java 11 and 12 new features, Java 7 certification guide, is that her? Maybe that's, it was a translation of her Java book into what looks to be, is that Japanese? I don't know. I think that's Japanese, but I'm not sure. I'm still learning. That's Japanese. Like this thing right here, that's Japanese right there. So that's probably, but this looks like proper like Mandarin. So I'm very confused. Like, but on the other hand, that a lot of the characters that are the Japanese can also read and write Chinese, characters, Hanzi. So like, that's interesting. Anyway, amazing, legendary. Mala Gupta. So if you don't want to come see me, which is fair, I wouldn't blame you. Definitely come to talk to her. She's like amazing. Okay, so that's that. A little bit of programming notes, a little bit of housekeeping. I just wanted to get out of the way, and then as usual, friends, I know it's already like 2 weeks or whatever, but there's a lot of people in Turkey who need our help. So if you can just, donate. Oh my God, I can't believe that situation. It's still a nightmare. So yeah, donate. People need you. Okay. I think we're ready to go. I think we're ready to get into this. Let's talk about web programming. There's no I have no one thing I want to show you. It's a live stream, so we can explore, kind of like look at a little bit of everything, and just think about the world in terms of all the different web technologies, or at least some of the web technologies. Actually, I can't even show you all of them. I don't think we did anything with the orders stuff, so let's get rid of that. We've got customers here. Notice that I'm doing packages by feature, right? So this is the customers support. I've got my HTTP controller here. I've got customers. I've got my events. I've got the service. I've got all the stuff having to do with customers in one package. I don't do, MVC doesn't mean different packages. If you find yourself writing models dot asterisk and controllers dot asterisk and services dot asterisk and repositories dot asterisk, just stop. You've done it wrong. Just start again. Put everything related to customers in the same package. And if there are HTTP and services and all that, that's fine, right? Okay. Now, my friends, we have our customer data. I built a controller yesterday, right? It wasn't a very interesting one, but I did, okay? And what I want to stress is that let's just get rid of all of that. Actually, we can keep that. For now, we're gonna get rid of this endpoint, okay? And we'll just make it a regular @controller. And controller, this annotation, first things first, this annotation has nothing to do with the web. People forget. This is a stereotype annotation. It has nothing to do with the web. It's an example is a web controller, but it doesn't assume the web. It just assumes that this is a bean, a component that sits in the path between a request coming in from an external protocol, be it HTTP or GraphQL or SOAP or REST or WebSockets or RSocket or whatever, and your business logic, right? Something has to adapt the request coming in from the external protocol into a request that your business logic can then handle, right? So what your job is, normally a controller, if you think about it, is a thin layer that takes data from the external request and turns it into a form that we can then forward on to usually a service of some sort. That's it. You're not supposed to have business logic here, and this is just a mapping layer. It's the glue code between your protocol and your business logic. And so this annotation signals as much. So you'll find that even though there are stereotype annotations that go beyond this, for example, REST controller, they are all just ultimately controllers. So if you take these two things together, that's our recipe for creating an HTTP REST controller. But you can actually use this stereotype annotation, and this stereotype annotation is REST controller, right? It has controller and response body, just like we saw here. So these two, or this, they are exactly the same thing. That's why sometimes you'll see me write it like this, just because I think it's more illustrative from a learning perspective to remember that these two things are the same thing. What that means, my friends, is that you can actually create your own annotations, right? So we didn't do that. I kind of wish we had, if I'm honest with you. I wish we had. To me, it makes a lot of sense to do that. But like @response body, and I can make Josh's REST controller. I can do that, right? And there you go, @Josh REST controller. So there's that, right? That's easy. I can do that. If I wanted to just create a GraphQL controller, I could say rename GraphQL controller. Okay. What about an RSocket one? Well, let's rename that to RSocket controller. If you want to have your own meta annotations that tell you whether this bean is meant to handle RSocket or whatever, you can. But ultimately, they're all just controllers. Spring doesn't care what you do within that, right? It's really the way that Spring discovers that this is something for RSocket versus HTTP versus WebSockets versus whatever is with the annotations that you use on the methods. On the controller, we call those controller handler methods, okay? So for example, here I had Git mapping. So that tells it that is a verb from HTTP, right? It's a get, HTTP get. So that tells Spring that this has to do with HTTP gets, right? That's all it needs to know. This handler method resolves to HTTP gets. In theory, though, like I could actually have this, controller. I could have GraphQL controller. I could, whatever, REST controller. I could have all these on the same thing. It's redundant, right? You don't need all those. You could just have controller, but they all mean the same thing. And because I can have controller, and because I can do this, I can actually have, like, for example, if I had, what is it, mutation mapping. I don't have GraphQL, but if I don't have it on the class path, right? But if I had mutation, if I wanted to do a mutation, I could do that with this as well. I could have multiple protocols in the same HTTP controller, right? In fact, if I wanted to do, like, here's my regular controller, right? But I want this is for a HTTP endpoint. I could just put response body on that. That means that this is going to be like a REST endpoint. But over here, if I don't have that response body, I can say customers.html string render customers like this, right? And this is a MVC HTTP endpoint, not a REST endpoint, but you're going to render a server-side generated template, right? So customers, etc. I can go here, source main resources, templates, create a new file called customers.html. And I don't have any templating technologies on the class path. Let's go back to this, and we'll add some right now. Whoopsies, what did I just do that for? Go back. Not this one, the other one. Let's see. New tab, Spring Initializer, yes. Okay, so I go here. I see a question here. What is this question? You're doing your template rendering in the around aspect of your custom. So you're creating like an AOP aspect, and you have a custom annotation. Are you ready? So this is like a REST endpoint you're creating. This one right here. Okay. Oops. Okay, I'm getting feedback on the iPad. Now it seems to be fixed. But anyway, yeah, I would just, whatever Oliver says, Oliver is, he knows what he's talking about. He's a genius. Okay, so I've created a view. Let's go back here and get a view rendering technology, and one that's very popular, but you don't have to use it, is Timeleaf. And this mechanism, this engine, you just add it to the build.gradle. And there are others. I forget which ones we have nowadays, but like you can see, we've got is it free marker? Yeah, we got that. Velocity still? No more velocity. Free marker. Don't do JSP if you can avoid it. There's a few. I always forget. Mustache. Yeah, mustache. There you go. You can do mustache-based views as well. So you would just add that like this. Springboard starter mustache, Springboard starter Timeleaf. Let's just go ahead and add them both, and we'll re-import the build. So let's see what it looks like for Timeleaf. Hello, Timeleaf for each loop. Okay. Got the Timeleaf dependencies. Okay, I just need this part right here. I need a valid Timeleaf document. This gives me everything except for the valid Timeleaf document. I just want the, well, okay, I wonder if I can register that. So let's just try that, okay? So this should be HTML body, paste that in there, and we're going to say for each customer in the customer's attribute, customer. I think you need to register the namespaces. That's where I'm, simple Timeleaf example, okay? Okay. Oh, it's Mikong. I remember this. I love this guy. He always produces good stuff too, just like Baldo. Here we go. This is a little bit more than I needed, but it works. Okay. Goody. Okay, so we're going to paste that up there. Get rid of all that. Valid. It looks valid to me, right? Okay, good. So I don't need this, don't need that, don't need this. Let's code Spring Boot 3. Okay, that looks like a standard-ish HTML page. And the nice thing about Timeleaf is it is standard compliant, right? So I've got a XML namespace here for Timeleaf. I can register it, I suppose. Fetch that. Okay, whatever. So I've got a Timeleaf namespace, and then I can use these tag elements, right? These tag elements let me create a for each loop. I'm going to for each customer in a model attribute called customers, then render this TD element. And actually, I mean, why is it? Oh, it's a table. Oh, okay. So I remember tables. I almost never use them anymore. So we're going to create for each element in the customer's model attribute, we're going to create a row in the table, which has 2 cells, which is going to show the ID and the name. Okay. So, H1 customers. Okay. And we should be able to restart. Let's restart now if we can. Oh, router properties. That was my example yesterday. We don't need that. Okay. So localhost 8080 customers. We haven't actually set up the logic here, have we? So I forgot. I'm getting ahead of myself. So for HTTP REST, you can go to customers, right? But what I want to do is I want to render an HTML page. So I'm going to just call it .do. And my job is to render a map with keys and values that will then get rendered with this template. And this there's something called a view resolver in play here. And so, the view resolver hierarchy it's been there forever, right? This is classic Spring MVC stuff. So the basic approach is given a string view name and the current locale, resolve a view object. And there are view resolvers for all the different things you can imagine. So free marker, mustache, groovy, static templates, view resolvers, Timeleaf, view resolver, etc. What's an Ajax Timeleaf? Oh, Ajax Timeleaf is when you have like a publisher that you can use to continuously update something without reloading the page. That's cool. So yeah, we've got these different view resolvers. We're using the Timeleaf view resolver. Spring Boot has already configured this for us. And what this is going to do is it's going to look for, when you ask it to render customers, it's going to look for, source main resources, templates, customers.html, right? That's the basic approach. So let's see here. Where's our wow, there are a lot of variables here. Okay, 1,000 lines of code. That seems insane to me, but fine, it works. Okay, so given the view name, we get the AutoWire capable of bean factory. We check and see if the view bean exists. For Timeleaf, the view. Thank you, Thomas. I will take a look. View bean exists. Timeleaf, blah blah blah. It's assigned from. Get the view definition, etc. You don't trust me. You don't want to do this code yourself. But when you return that, it gets fed into that view resolver, which eventually returns source main resources, etc. So our job, friends, is to return a model and view, or a model like this. So my var mav equals new model and view, and the view name is customers, and the data that I want in that I want to make available for the context is this. I want to say this dot customers cache. There you go. Okay. And I can just return that. That's actually, there's other ways to do this. You could just return a model. You could return probably just you can inject the model here as a request as a what is the there's an annotation, right? So get rid of that. What is it? Model attribute, I think, maybe. No, something like that. You can do all sorts of things, but this should be enough. Let's try this. Okay, so now we go to, what did I call it? .do. There you go, right? So we've got these two records printed out in HTML, and you can see it rendered a table and a cell for each row here, okay? So there you go, very, very simple, very, very, very trivial example. Now let's try this with mustache, okay? Mustache iteration. Yes, blah, 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 like that. That seems annoying. What is this dot? I want the name. Oh, that's horrific. Mustache.render. I just want mustache for each. Data, message, comment. So data is the top level for each. Print out data.message. And then for each, okay, that's what we're looking for. So that's a mustache. Okay, so we're going to create another view here. Customers dot, is it just mustache? I don't know. We'll figure it out. Paste that in there. HTML. Okay, body, that, and we don't need the sub loop. So for each record in customers, right? We just want to iterate through it all and print out the name and the ID. And you know, I suppose we just do this, right? So TD like that, TD, 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 TR, then a table. Okay, table. I think that'll work. Bye-bye, Thomas. Thanks for joining us today. Okay, so let's see how that one would work. Custom HTML. So we want to render customers with Timeleaf. Okay, we're going to call this .timeleaf. Let's create a new endpoint that does exactly the same thing, but with mustache. Okay, so and there we go. And arguably, I could just probably like I could create one model in view since the data is I'm referencing the same collection each time, and we're just, you might remember we published an event whenever there's a new custom added, so we're re-rendering that. So arguably, this could be reused for both, right? Like that. So private final this, return this dot model in view, and this dot model in view. Put up here. Okay, so let's try this again. Okay, close localhost customers still works. Customers got Timeleaf still works. What about mustache? Well, it seems to work. I should probably like have. Oh, it doesn't work. There's no way that works. Like it's not even spelled correctly. Rename customers. Okay, got mustache. So with mustache, right? Customers with Timeleaf. Okay, almost there. Let's see. That is customers with mustache. Okay. Wait, what is the issue with that though? With mustache. Oh, it's right. Okay, so we want this. Okay. There's mustache. Now, what about Timeleaf? Oh, we got a problem. See, only one of them is winning because I'm giving it the same string and it doesn't know which one to render. So I can actually probably just return a view directly, right? Which is not great, but you could do that. What else could I do? I guess I could just rename it, right? So customers Timeleaf and customers mustache. Okay, so that way I've got so this is customers MU and customers TL. So I have to change the HTTP controller to reflect that. So the view, in that case, I can't inline it. I need to actually, I cannot stash it. I need to reuse. I need to like redo it each time. So take that. Okay. Customers MU and customers TL. All right. Okay, looks good. And where's my error? Oh, I've got compiling errors, compilation errors. Okay, Timeleaf is working. What about mustache? It's not working. Customers.mustache is supposed to return. Oh, I changed this by accident. Okay. Let's see here, friends. There we go. Customers with mustache. And what about customers with Timeleaf? Come on. That works as well. Good. So you can see what's happening here. I've got the ability to render multiple kinds of views depending on the view resolver that's in play, and that view resolver is informed by convention. And so you can return a model and view object directly. The model and view, you can see it actually takes a view object right there, right? So in theory, I could create my own programmatic view, var my view equals new view, right? Or actually, let's just try this class. My view implements view. Okay. Implement those methods. And, you know, the job is pretty simple. You're given a request and response. You're given the context, which is the model, the data that we just saw before. You're given the content type, and I'm gonna, you know, this view could return anything, right? It could be a PDF. It could return a spreadsheet, all sorts of different things. And so your job is, given the model, to return the data that's going to be associated with that. So here, you know, text HTML, I think is the MIME type. Actually, let's just media type dot HTML. There you go. I think it's just text HTML, but we can use that. Yeah, text HTML. And then you can render this. I can say, okay, return, request response, dot output stream. Yes, is there a writer? Yeah, I get the writer, and then print. Print. Okay. So let's create a new custom view here. This is the old-fashioned way. This is what you would do if you didn't find a writer that worked for you. So we'll create a static class myView, or static class myView, and here we'll say HTML, custom merge with custom view. Okay, h1, and then would say table, and here we'd have to do it ourselves, the old-fashioned way, right? So, model.get attribute customers var customers equals this, and we'd have to say it's or default, and it would be a list.of custom, list of customer, and what is that? What's the issue? Oh, okay, yeah, it's fine. Just return. It's fine. You didn't need to break your fragile type system. Silly language. Okay, list of. What's the issue? Get or default is supposed to return what? We don't know what it's supposed to return. That's why this is complaining. I see. Okay, so you can't do that? I think you can. That seems like the least you could do. Oh, it needs for me to be very specific. Is that true? Customer list.of object list of customer. Why is it so unhappy? Object. Provided Java-lang object. Yeah, that seems fair. Get or default. It does not like that at all. So let's just do the simple thing and leave it with just get, and then we'll do some tests. We'll say if customer's instance of list of whatever list, then we can render this. Okay, I'm going to do this the old-fashioned way, the hard way. This is the painful way. So we're going to render a view, a custom view. So how do we do this? I wish I could test for this. I wish I could say if it's a list of customer, but you can't in this language. So for var c in list c, we don't know. If c instance of customer, like our list of customers equals new array list customer. Hello. There you go. Okay. If it's customer, then we say list of customers dot add customer. All right, and now we want to render that. So what we're going to do is we're going to say list of customers dot stream dot map customer, and you know, the old, oh, it's so hideous. Don't do this. It's just interesting to know that it can be done, right? So td and we want this and this, and we'll say string.format this and c.id. That's still correct. String. Oh no, it's in there. c.id, c.name. Okay, so for each customer, I'm creating a string, and I'm going to collect that into a joined string like that. Okay, so I'll just use a r string. Okay, is that a string? It should be a string. That's a string. So I've joined it, and I'm just going to concatenate that here. So I'll say string format this. Okay, like so. And we'll say string. Okay, so this is my custom view type. Okay, we've created a custom hard-coded view so that you can see how that would work. And we can do what we want here. This, the more normal use case is you'd render binary data, right? Something that is like an image or something like that. Okay, so here I'm going to say customers custom or customers custom. Okay, model and view render customers with custom view return new model and view. Okay, customers custom. Okay, and map that of customers this dot customers cache, etc. So actually the view name, we need to provide the implementation, new hard-coded view. There you go. Ooh, pain. Okay, still works. Localhost 8080 customers dot custom. What did I do wrong? Customers dot custom. It should have gotten this bit right here. Oh, okay, wait. So actually, did I forget to flush? Is that what happened? Yeah, it looks like I forgot to flush. So response.getWriter.flush. Let's try that. No, that's not it. Is this even being invoked? That's the other question. Replace all two occurrences. Writer, var, try. Okay. Let's try this. Let's see if we're going to get here. This is from our debugging session yesterday. Okay, nothing got called. So I'm not even convinced that we're getting to this point. Let's just keep trying it. Okay, what does the model contain here, friends? It's got one key called customers. Okay, so if model.get, okay, it comes back as a what? As a customers, is a model map. Okay. Oh, it's a list, it's a set, which has 2 entries in it. Good. Oh, that's the issue. It never gets to that point because it's a set. Okay, good. So restart. Yeah, with the increased popularity of server-side rendering these days, we might just see we might just start seeing more use of older tech such as Timeleaf, and the word "older" there is in air quotes. You're 100% right? Like, I quite like I don't like server-side rendered templates, to be honest with you. I don't like having to do all this work on the server side. I think we should let the people that are familiar with building front-end websites use the tools they feel most appropriate. But yeah, this does have the benefit of being very fast, because I can do all the hard work of rendering on the server side as opposed to dropping it in everybody's browsers to figure out. Okay, okay, next. Good. So so far it looks like it's working. List of customers has one item, customer ID, blah, blah, blah. Okay, good. And then what? So keep going. We're now down to here. And in theory, by the time we get to this line over here, we should have at least our data. So you can see our thing is getting invoked. We have a string. The string has Jürgen and it has Stefan. Okay. So it's at least working. We got the ID and the name. And then what about down here? We get to this point and we get a string with a customer. So print writer. Okay. Okay. It looks like it should have been rendered correctly. Okay, what's the issue? Do we need to nothing except, no, there's no exception. So now I'm very confused. Oh, maybe I spoke too soon. Was there an exception? No, looks like it's fine. It rendered the dispatcher servlet rendered it. So I guess we're just good. Oh, there you go. It did work. So I didn't do any handling of. That's what the issue was. I had to do the try and the auto closable. Basically, I wasn't closing the writer when I was done with it, and so it wasn't ever getting closed. I didn't do any proper handling here of MIME types and character sets. I didn't do any of that. But you can see what's happening here, right? I built a custom view behind the scenes. It's a terrible view. You should not do this, right? We established that. Let's see, rename customers or hard-coded customers view. There you go. So I built a custom view to demonstrate what's happening. The model is just your data. That's the data you put in there. Notice that we got access to this map. That data comes from the data that we put in the model and view. So here's the model, right? And it can be anything. You can have as many keys as you want with any kind of data, and then it's just up to you in your view of choice to render it. Here, I've got view resolvers that are going to take this string and then render for me. But if I want to provide my own view, I can do that, right? There's no reason I can't. So there's lots of options. I think you can also just return a view directly, if you want. Like in this case, it was a little. I could probably just return a view directly if I know what I'm going to render. If I don't need a map to give me the context, But either way, you get the idea. This is basic Spring MVC. I've got a model. I've got the controller, which is a thing that listens for HTTP requests. Spring connects this with the HTTP endpoints, and then the request comes in. It has data associated with the request that gets passed in as the model, and then it gets routed to a view. And that view resolution happens based on this matching that we're doing in this controller method. The controller is pairing my model with my view, right? And it's doing whatever work is required to adapt the model to the view and then to render the view back to the client, right? And so it's an ongoing cycle. It just keeps going and going and going and going. Okay, so that's Spring MVC. There's a lot of other stuff. I mean, we haven't even begun to scratch. You know, one of the things I've never done. I haven't even tried. Like it would just be. I think it would be insane. What it is? I've never done a Spring tips video on Spring MVC. And look, I know the basics. I mean, I can teach you the basics, right? That's fine. But Spring MVC, like I dare you to find the project page for Spring MVC, right? There is none. It's always been a part of Spring Framework. Spring MVC is part of Spring Framework. And in fact, little known fact, Spring Framework, was actually written to make working on the web, among other things, cleaner. So basically, we started with the web framework and then added the dependency injection, not the other way around, right? It just happens that, so Spring MVC has always lived with Spring Framework. It has co-evolved, and you know, it was very clear even 20 plus years ago that you couldn't be on the web and couldn't build interesting services without being on the web, right? So this stuff has just been there forever. So I just showed you model and view, right? Like, look at the creator, Rod Johnson. Again, this guy, amazing. He's the founder of Spring, but he hasn't been on the Spring team since 2012. You can imagine how old this is, right? Like, let's see, download, here's the code. There's no year. Like this, yeah, most of these people, the only person, there's Jürgen and Russen. These two people are still with us, you know, they're alive. Everybody's alive. I'm not sure. When I say with us, I mean on the Spring team. So abstract controller, oh dear, yeah, this is a very old class, right? This class is, you're not even supposed to use this really anymore, right? Abstract controller. Yeah, this type is decades old, you know, these types. So some of the first lines of code were written for the web. In fact, I think if you looked, what is the oldest class in Spring? I think you'd find it actually has something to do with the web. The oldest class that we can still find that has a date on it, you know? So Spring MVC is very important. It'll always be there, I guess. But me, like I said, I'm quite a fan of being able to just return some JSON and then let the JavaScript wizards do their thing on the client side. You know, I actually quite like the client server architecture. Okay, so here's my controller. You've seen that with this flexible controller, this humble HTTP controller, I was able to create a HTTP endpoint for REST, kind of, not really, but we did that. It's an HTTP endpoint for sure, though. It's a HTTP JSON endpoint. We looked at creating a custom view. We looked at model and view. We looked at mustache. We looked at Timeleaf. There's other things. There's like, you know, you can create custom URLs here. So let's say get mapping customers. And then maybe I want like a particular one by its ID. Okay, so model and view, render customer by ID. And here I could reference that templated part there as a path variable. And in fact, this gets converted for me if I wanted to, right? So I can say return new model and view customer, just customer map.of customer, and then I could just whatever dot, you know, iterator dot next. Okay, so I could get the first value of that collection, for example. And I don't have a view here, a custom view, but it would work. I think I could also just return the map, right? That's also another thing you could do, is just return the map and do string.of or whatever. Or no, you'd have to inject it. So model map, that's what it is. Model map. Is that what it is? Is that the class? Or is it just model? That looks like it. So model, I'd say model dot put or add attribute. Yes, and then customer. Like that. Would that work? Return customer. Let's try that. Let's create a view here. New file, customer, single. Okay, and we're just gonna copy and paste the Timeleaf template here. Customer. We're not trying to iterate over anything. We're just gonna render one single one. So div, okay. So a single customer with Timeleaf. Try that, reload. Customer 1. Oops, 404 not found. Oh, customers, right. So customers. Good. There you go. There's our single customer with Timeleaf, and you can see path. You can use path variables there. I could have expressed this as a request parameter instead, in which case it looks like this: a request param at request param. Okay, same idea, and the ID is not being used here, but let's log it so you can kind of see. SLF for J and log.info. The customer ID is ID, and put that back there. And maybe I should make this a little bit more. Maybe I should actually do what the user is asking. So dot filter ID equals ID. Okay, good. Distinct, and then collect to set, and then I want the iterator. Oh yeah. Next, there's only one value. Okay, so this is pointless. Okay, so that would actually give me the specific customer you asked for. Let's go ahead and try it. There's no error handling here. Okay, whoops, linked hash map. Cannot map custom. Oh, okay. Oh, because it's customers.do. Let's just try that. Okay, so customers.do, and then ID equals 1. There you go. Okay, so same idea. I'm able to get the different records by using those request parameters or those path variables. Very, very convenient. You can see that there's a different way of returning the view name. You don't have to use model in view. You can just use a string, and you can inject the model like this, and Spring will do the right thing. Oh, okay, good. So that's basic Spring MVC. I don't know if that's all that interesting. It's just been there forever. You can't know Spring without knowing some of the Spring MVC stuff, just because it's there forever. Behind the scenes, Spring MVC is using the dispatcher servlet. This is a servlet that's part of the servlet API. We're using Spring Boot 3 here. So one thing that's interesting is that this code is using Jakarta.servlet. So remember, Javax.servlet is the old API. If you're using Spring Boot 3 and you're using the new Jakarta EE 9 and later, those packages have changed. And there's nothing the Spring team could have done here, right? This is just a poison pill that Oracle inserted into the negotiations to make it, I don't know why they did this. It was just very unfortunate, but they broke everything ever written against Java EE. So if you ever used Java EE before, all that code is now broken. If you're using Spring, like we are here, and you're not dealing with any servlet APIs, unfortunately, because I did this custom view, I am dealing with the HTTP servlet request and the HTTP servlet response. But in theory, if you're just using regular APIs, you're not creating your own custom views, because most people don't need to do that, then you don't know or care that those underlying Java EE APIs are broken. But they have, and you should just know about that now. Okay, so Spring MVC, let's see, customer, we're going to call this customer. Oh, actually, that's fine. We did a bunch of stuff there. What else? We haven't looked at REST. Let's take some time and look at REST. And to look at REST, we need to think about the REST. What is that? Dr. Richardson's hierarchy of REST, right? Like, so let's see, Richardson's hierarchy of REST APIs. Okay, Leonard Richardson's, right? Richardson maturity model. A model developed by Leonard Richardson breaks down the principal elements of REST approaches in 3 steps. They introduce resources, HTTP verbs, and hypermedia controls. So when people talk about REST these days, they don't really talk about REST. They're talking about HTTP APIs, right? And that's why you've seen me be very careful, hopefully, when I talk about REST, because I'm not we're not actually doing REST. What I just did, even this endpoint up here where I'm just returning JSON, that isn't REST. That's HTTP APIs with JSON, you know? And it's sort of like, I feel a bit like what's that guy's name? That creep. Richard Stallman, right? Not Stallman, is that right? Yeah, the guy who started the GNU project, right? I feel like him sometimes because I find myself constantly saying, actually, REST isn't. It's just like he's always, Linux is actually the GNU, GNU whatever plus Linux kernel, right? Like REST is not this. This is not REST. This is just HTTP. REST as envisaged by the original sort of white paper, no, the original thesis, doctoral thesis by who's the other guy? REST, creator of REST is Roy Fielding, Dr. Roy Fielding, who's he did a lot of work in Apache, like the Apache web server, a lot of work in the original sort of HTTP 1.0 spec and 1.1. Like he's huge in the REST and HTTP world. And when he did his doctoral thesis, his PhD thesis in university, he created REST. It was envisioned as a way of representing system service state, as a way of communicating state to the client in a consistent, scalable, uniform way. And when he talked about it 20 plus years ago, more than 20 years ago, he wasn't talking about sending back JSON, right? He was talking about sending back both data and a consistent way to understand the data. That's why the web is so amazing. It's because when the browser goes to google.com, it gets back a content type, and that content type tells it what it can do. Well, your API should also tell the client what they can do. And if you otherwise, it's hard to understand what to do with your APIs, right? You need to have this coupling, and that's not if you have coupling on the client and the server, and they can only work with each other, then you're not really any further along than you would have been with just RPC, and you've lost all the benefits of using HTTP REST without any of the. And you've got all the drawbacks, but none of the benefits, right? HTTP REST is scalable, it's fast, it's amazing, but it's not particularly efficient, right? HTTP, even with HTTP 2.0, isn't super efficient. So there are better ways, there are faster ways to send data. So if you're going to give up all the benefits of REST, all the scalability of using hypermedia and all that, then you might as well just go back to something that gives you faster performance, right? Like use RSocket or even gRPC, although gRPC is, not my favorite, but it does work. My point is there's better ways to build services if you are willing to couple your client and your service. There are much better ways than HTTP REST. I wouldn't, you know what I'm saying? So you've got to at least embrace REST, give it a chance. REST is amazing, right? But to say you're using REST but then not is it's a bit of a problem, right? It just feels like you're missing out on all the benefits, and then when it breaks down and things don't work, then you say, oh, well, REST doesn't work. That's not true. You didn't do REST. And I know that sounds a bit like the no true Scotsman argument. You know that one, no true Scotsman fallacy, right? Or appeal to purity is an informal fallacy in which one attempts to protect their universal generalization from a falsifying counterexample by excluding the counterexample improperly. So I'm not saying that sounds, what I just said kind of sounds like I'm using the no truth Scotsman thing, but I don't know. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I don't know how to if you don't use REST, then you can't say you're using REST. And REST is very simple. At least if we're asking Roy Fielding, REST is very simple. It has certain definitions. And so while REST today means something else, the way I was taught it and the way you should learn it and the way to think about it is in this very sort of clear cut definition that Roy Fielding espoused more than 20 years ago. Okay. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about REST in Spring. Okay, so I'm gonna commit this because I think Ahmed was gonna do us a favor, and let's see, git status, git commit customers, git push. Okay, so there we go. That's the current version of the code with MVC stuff. Let's get rid of all this other stuff. We don't need to focus on the views and the anymore. Let's talk about REST. Okay. Excuse me. And we don't need this custom annotation. There we go. A lot simpler. Get rid of all that. We can go back to our build. Get rid of the custom view templates. We don't need those anymore. Okay. Okay, good. So let's talk about REST. So the first thing is, like I said, this is HTTP API, right? And notice that I've been using response body and controller, and I said you can actually just add response body to the endpoint. But if you put response body here, it's assumed that every endpoint in the controller will be representing itself with JSON or some sort of message converter, right? But let's talk about so we talked about this Richardson's maturity model. Level 0 is the swamp of pox. Level 0 is what you get when you're just doing straight RPC. Like RMI is the swamp of pox, right? It's using, or actually SOAP is the swamp of pox, right? Using HTTP as a transport system for remote interactions, but without using any of the mechanisms of the web. So in theory, basically level 0 also describes SOAP. It describes GraphQL, right? It's just a transport. You're using HTTP, but just barely, right? You're not using the power implied by that protocol. So using it as a tunneling system for your own remote interaction mechanism, usually based on RPC. In fact, for a long time, Spring even had the HTTP service invoker, which I quite liked because it was RMI payloads sent over HTTP. So it could punch through firewalls easily in corporate environments, but it also had the benefit of being nice, efficient, serialized data. The only problem was it was coupled. You couldn't change the payload without breaking the system, right? But that's true for all major RPC systems. Okay, so this is level 0. If you're using REST, you do not want to use this. This is why when you use SOAP, you're not using REST. Okay. And you can, the way you can, like, okay, here you go, appointment service, and then you send in some data, and then you get more data back, and you can send a verb in the payload. The action that you want to do is in the payload of the document that's being sent, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, level 1. Now you start breaking the system down by resources, right? You're still not using the verbs. You're still not using get and post and delete and all that. Maybe you're just using post for everything, just like you would with SOAP, right? Or XML RPC, right? Here, the first step towards the glory of REST in the Richardson maturity model is to introduce resources. So now you've got custom endpoints, custom URIs, right? / customers, / or orders, / whatever, right? Products. Hello, Kunal. How are you, buddy? Good to see you. Thanks for joining. So anyway, yeah, this has been. For those of you just joining, we're looking at web programming with Spring today, and this is a big topic. So we're going to do a very quick run through a lot of stuff. We looked at MVC. We just covered that whole thing, not all of it. We looked at a lot of it, but not even close to all of it. We looked at different rendering technologies, and we looked at model and view resolvers and views and blah blah blah. Okay, so now we're looking at REST, and we're looking at how REST, as used today, isn't actually what REST should have been and could have been and what was intended for it to have been. Okay, so when you get to and then we're looking at this Richardson. Can I post this? Yeah, I probably can. Let me see. This is Martin Fowler's Richardson maturity model. I wonder if I'm allowed to post links. I don't know. Why wouldn't I be? Fingers crossed. Cool. Oh, that's interesting. It posted from me, from both YouTube and from Twitch. That's neat. Okay, so for Twitter, I can't post it, and for LinkedIn, I guess I can't post it. I don't know. But for those two, it seems to have worked. So then level, where are we? This is level 0. We're level 1. You have different endpoints, but you're still basically tunneling through the same verb, right? So this could be like XML. This could be, what's a good example of this? I don't know. It's very weird. XMRPC can be used like this, I guess, but basically you're still communicating the verb in the payload itself. You're not using get and put and delete and post and options and all that. Okay. What about, okay, so next level is level 2. Level 2 is where we are with, like what I just showed you here, this endpoint. I'm using HTTP GET, calling customers, and I'm getting a collection of JSON. That's level 2, okay? And this is unfortunately, where people stop, is level 2, right? Here, I'm using get, verbs have a certain meaning most of the time, right? So, you've got, okay, here you've got get, post, delete, options, put, the standard. There's more. There's a few more, maybe. I don't know. Whatever. You've got a few other verbs, but these are the big ones, right? Get, post, delete, options, put. And this verb, let me see here. This verb, get, is to tell the HTTP service to respond with some data. Post is to tell it that you're going to either add to an existing collection or resource or update, right? Usually people use it to create. Delete means, to delete some data, delete the data associated with a resource. Options gives you the ability to ask questions about the resource itself without getting a response. And put usually is used to update, okay? To update a part of the resource. It's like a patch. Oh, actually, there's another verb. I forgot. Patch. That's like a patch. Put I would just use for updates, okay? But that's the problem, is there is a little bit of variability there, and what I just said could be wrong, which is another reason why, frankly, I don't love REST. But if I'm going to do REST, I want to do it right, Okay, so level 2, you get verbs, right? So here this is not, there's no communication in the payload about what action to take. It's just implied. If I'm making a call using HTTP GET to the open slots endpoint, then I get back the data. I'm supposed to be reading data, right? HTTP GET is a safe operation, so I'm not making changes to anything either, right? Whew. Okay, good. So there we go. To book an appointment, we need an HTTP verb that does change state, a post or a put. So here we use a post, and here we're going to update. Yeah, exactly. He's like me. He's like, it's a pain. The differences there are annoying, right? But I do want to point out that some people incorrectly make a correspondence between post, put, and create, update. There you go. That's the one I just made, and it looks like I was wrong. Yeah, exactly. So awkward. Yeah, sure. Even if I use the same post as level 1, there's okay. In the remote service responds. If all goes well, the service replies with a response code of 201 to indicate that there's a new resource in the world. Yeah, so when you create a post, you get a 201 saying, okay, it's not only a successful response, but there's a new record, so it's 201, and you get the location of that new thing, okay? So this is basically basic verbs. 201 includes a location attribute. If you have an error, you might get a 409 conflict, right? You're using status codes there. You're making more fulsome use of the HTTP protocol. Something has gone wrong. In this case, a 409 seems to be a good choice to indicate. By the way, this bothers me, right? 409 seems to be a good choice. I don't like protocols where it seems to be, right? This is why I get sort of, yeah, okay, great. So someone has already updated the resource in an incompatible way, rather than using a return code of 200, but including an error response. That's true. You should use status codes to communicate errors, not, data in the payload itself. So at level 2, we explicitly use some kind of error response like this. It's up to the protocol designer what codes to use, but there should be a non-2xx response if an error crops up, right? Level 2 introduces using HTTP verbs and HTTP response codes. Great. Okay, finally, hypermedia, right? This is the part where I think, I mean, if it's a protocol, it must be an exact response. Yeah, that's my thinking. And what he's saying makes a lot of sense. He's also saying it's up to the designer of the API to decide what HTTP status code should be used. It's not like we can foresee every single endpoint use case, but and in practice, there's we don't use every single status code. There's like, what is I am a teapot, right? I am a teapot status code, right? Nobody uses this. This is like a joke. Status code 418. I am a teapot. Client indicates that the server refuses to brew coffee because it is permanently a teapot. A combined coffee teapot that is temporarily out of coffee should instead return a 503. This error is a reference to hypertext coffee pot protocol defined in an April Fool's joke in 1998 and in 2014. Some websites use this response for requests that they do not wish to handle, such as automated queries, right? So like, it's a joke. It's obviously a joke, and it's kind of funny and great. But if it's not really, it's not. There's a lot of URLs here, a lot of status codes that you can use. Most of them, most of your errors will map correctly to some of these. Hopefully, they map unambiguously to some of these. Right? But I can't guarantee that. Nobody can, right? These status codes. You might think a different status code applies than I do, right? And that's kind of what I don't love about this. Okay. Okay, so good. Now, hypermedia. Let's talk about hypermedia. That's what we're here for, right? Hypermedia is the final level of indirection that introduces something you often hear referred to under the ugly acronym of HADIOS. Hypermedia, or hypertext, as the engine of application state. It addresses the question of how to get from a list of open slots to another state by knowing what to do to book an appointment. So imagine you're calling an endpoint and you want to make a reservation. You call the endpoint and you get the open slots back. Then it gives you some links and it says, okay, if you want to make this reservation, here's the URL to go to next. And so the idea is that your response has not just
sure I understand.
I didn't ask you. The idea is that this thing, your endpoint knows not just what to send back, but also it gives you a menu, a list of endpoints that you can follow that will take you somewhere else, right? And then you can use. And so you might say, okay, I'm going to get all the open appointments. Then I'm going to make maybe I want to go book that appointment, and so I get a link to another appointment from there, and then I can send a post to that, right? Well, once I've made that appointment, it'll give me a location header, right? And it'll give me another menu of options that I can then use to view the appointment. And I can then take that URL and make a delete to delete that appointment, right? So now I can start from /. I can just send somebody, I can say, here's my API, joshlong.com, or api.joshlong.com. And I can start from there and I can figure out automatically in the client what to do next, right? The API tells me what it's capable of. It doesn't just work when I make a request to a well-known endpoint. And the best part about this is there's a bit of an indirection there. There's the name of the link and then the URL of the link. You don't care about the URL. You care about the name of the link. So when you get this menu, you actually get like a map, name, URL. And so you can say, okay, I want to go to this endpoint, get the name, and then get the URL. And if tomorrow I decide to change that URL, no problem. The client doesn't care about the URL. You're not coupled to the URL anymore, right? You get back this little bit of indirection. So now from both a publisher and a consumer side, you get longevity. You get resilience to change. This is what is so useful about HTTP and REST, is this ability to build systems at scale, not in the order of 6 months or 10 months or a year or whatever, but decades, right? This is the promise of hypermedia. I add meaning to the API, but I also add resilience on the URLs of the API. Because remember, in step 2, you are using, step 1, you're using resources, right? But those resources are URLs, and you're coupled when you use those URLs, right? Those URLs can't change unless you're willing to break the client. Now I can change the URLs and the client doesn't break. I'm adding indirection about where the client can go. And I also add readable explanations of what those URLs are, right? Yeah, so let's talk about that. And so there's actually a project that you can use called Spring Hypermedia, Spring HiDOS. So Hypermedia, there you go. We're going to add this one to our build. Okay, and now I haven't used this in years. Well, I mean, I've probably used it in years, but not recently. So we're going to have some fun here. We'll add this in. Friends, I'm going to go use the little live streamers room quickly. I'll be right back in just like 1 minute. Talk amongst yourselves. I'll give you a topic. Rhode Island is neither a road nor an island. Discuss. I'll be back in a sec. Okay, I'm back. So we have, nice content for ending Carnival here in Brazil. Yeah, it was Ash Wednesday today, isn't it? Isn't it? When is Ash Wednesday?
Ash Wednesday is today.
Yeah, it's today. Wow, yeah. Carnival and yeah. And they have equivalent celebrations. It's not just, I mean, Carnival is a, is there a, hi Vincent, yeah. Is there a reference like this Richardson maturity model for the REST practices? I mean, I think that's, maybe I'm misunderstanding, but the Richardson maturity model is the best practices. The best book I've ever read on REST, still to this day, is REST in Practice, right? This book is, you must read this, REST in Practice, by these two folks, Ian Robinson and Jim Weber, used to work at Neo4j. Jim Weber's still there, at least as far as I know. He is the chief scientist. This book is like 12 years old, at least, right? It's an old book now. And when did it come out? REST in Practice. And by the way, Jim Weber is a doctor, PhD, so Dr. Jim Weber. This book, when did it come out? REST in Practice. Here, 2010, this book came out. And I remember when it came out, and I saw Jim Weber speaking about it at Java Zone in Norway, I think, right, in Oslo. And this book changes everything, right? And so in this book, they have an example. Actually, in this book, they talk about RESTbucks, or they talk about an API built on a fictitious cafe, okay? That example actually came from messaging. It came from data access and discussions, right? So like that, if you go to, if you look at Starbucks does not use two-phase commit by my buddy Gregor Hoppe. Starbucks does not use two-phase commit. This blog, this post is by Gregor Hoppe, right here. And it was 2004. And the idea that he's talking about in this book, in this article, I mean, this blog, by the way, Gregor also wrote an amazing book that you must read. This book right here, Enterprise Integration Patterns. This is an amazing book. Very good. Like, it'll change how you think about messaging and distribution and integration and all that. So this is a event-driven messaging style book, right? And it came out in 2004. And again, there's, we just looked at Martin Fowler's blog. Guess who wrote the foreword for this? Martin Fowler, right? Which makes sense, right? Because it's a Martin Fowler signature series. But this book is, in this book, in this world, he talks about event-driven architectures and messaging and integration. And he has got this great post that came out a little bit after that. Maybe it was a little bit before that. But either way, it's called Starbucks Does Not Use Two-Phase Commit. And in it, he talks about how messaging can be used to integrate a lot of different transactions, to coordinate a lot of different steps in a workflow, right? And he talks about how when you go to the cafe, when you go to the Starbucks, you talk to the cash register, you talk to the person who will take your money. You give them your money, and then they give a receipt, which is like a claim check. That cup that they have, the person at the cash register writes on the cup what your order is going to be. Then they put the cup, a message, in front of the bar, and then somebody at the bar will make the drink for you, right? If the drink requires extra steps, then they'll move it to another station in the cafe. So there's multiple steps, and that message is your message. That cup is your message, and it's the message moving from one stage in the pipeline to another, and you're guaranteed to get a result at the end. The state will be exactly as it should be, but it's delivered in stages. And so this is this kind of this sets up lots of discussions, right? Staged event-driven architectures, and it sets up competing consumers. It sets up compensating actions and error handling and conversational flow and all sorts of other stuff, right? It's a great blog. You should definitely read this, right? Now, this Starbucks example is like a standard. It's like what everybody talks about when they want to learn event-driven architectures. And so then here comes this book, Rest in Practice, like 6 years later. Where's that book? 6 years later. I lost the book already. Rest in Practice. And this book, like I said, this book also has a cafe example, right? And the idea here is, okay, it's a different twist on the example that Gregor introduced in his blog years ago. This one is a slightly different one. Here, it's not about how the messages get moved from one place to another. It's about how the client interacts with the system to know where to go next. So imagine you go to the cafe, you make a get call to the Starbucks API. You get back a menu of all the different drinks. You pick one. You send a post to the drinks endpoint, and you know that you can send it to the drinks endpoint because there's a menu that comes back saying what verbs, what endpoints are available. You go to the drinks endpoint, you get another menu, and you can send a post to it, I guess. You get back an HTTP response. You send a post to it with your order. You get back an HTTP response with the location of your beverage and so on, right? And so you can move through this cafe API without ever having to like read documentation. The API describes itself, right? And so that's what this book talks about. And so that book, that example is famous. And so then we have a project in Spring called Spring Hypermedia, Spring HDOS, right? And we just added that here. This is this right here. Remember hypermedia or hypertext as the engine of application state. We added this to our build. This project was created by a guy named Oliver Dotbaum, right? Oliver Dotbaum. Okay. Here you go. He's amazing. I adore him, right? He was the former lead of Spring Data. He's just an amazing engineer, right? And he also created the Spring REST Bucks project as an example. And it basically hi Vivek, thanks for joining us today. It basically implements the cafe example that was from REST in Practice using the Spring Hypermedia project. And it in turn, it was inspired by the integration example. So it's all connected, right? This example today, you can see this example was updated just a month ago, right? It still gets updated. It's still very popular. Look, 95 watchers, 390 forks, 1.1 thousand stars for a sample application. I mean, it's a very useful sample application. So, my friends, all that to say, we're going to use that so we can refresh ourselves with Spring Hypermedia, okay? So, Spring REST Bucks. So we've got the Android client, we've got the server. Idea, well, let's see, Maven clean package. Let's do that first. Download all the dependencies. I'll let that download for a second. How are y'all doing today? How's everybody doing? Good? Good. Yeah, I'm good. I'm gonna let that build. I'm gonna go. Thanks for the book reference. Are you kidding? No problem. I'm happy you're gonna read them. They're great books, and they're Gregor is a friend of mine. I like a good person. Jim Weber, I have met on occasion. It's not like we are longtime friends or anything, but I have deep respect for all the people I just mentioned. Okay, so I'm wondering if team is managing REST endpoints internally. Is there any need to use Hypermedia? Seems redundant. Client-side dev can just use OpenAPI specs. That gets us to another good point, right? Which is, how do you communicate the structure of the payload to the client? And so the Hypermedia tells you about what endpoints you've got, right? It tells you about the verb. It tells you about what verbs and what URLs you've got. It doesn't really prescribe the payload of your documents. And in theory, ideally, what you would do is every single endpoint would have its own custom MIME type that tells you what payload you're going to be returning, right? So or at least every endpoint would use the correct MIME type for a custom document. So if you're returning customers, you'd have a MIME type for that. And people, they cut corners, right? And so they tried to add schema instead with OpenAPI. And that's, it works, it's fine, who cares? But OpenAPI doesn't get rid of Hypermedia, right? It helps you understand, it creates a schema for your payloads. But you still don't know where to go. You don't have any easy idea. In Poland, oh yeah, so thank you, Kunal, for great. I'm glad you're having fun. I'm glad you're getting something out of this. Thank you so much. And I'm glad you're having fun as well. I don't know how to pronounce your name, but hello to you in Poland. Dzień dobry, right? It means good day in Poland, right? I miss Poland. I have friends and there's even a person there I would consider part of my family. He's not exactly family, but not blood, but like my little brother. So so I guess this gets us back to hello again. Hello, my to Chamba. I'm not very good at pronouncing people's names, and I'm very sorry if I'm not doing a good job. But I'm very happy to see you all, and I'm happy if you want to write the correct phonetic pronunciation. I'll do my best to remember. Yes. So anyway, the question then you were asking is, hey, why don't I just use the open API and all that stuff? It seems redundant, and that's a good point. And that gets us back to what I was saying earlier. Your question is, if you're working internally and you're a small team and all that, then is there any reason to use hypermedia? And I would say maybe not. But also, there's no reason to use REST either, right? Or hypermedia or HTTP. All of that is, you're doing it wrong, right? You can do things faster if you are on the same page. In order to use HTTP, you have to add all this other crap to the protocol to make it workable at scale internally. Just use something like RSocket. It's faster, way more efficient, and more flexible, right? The reason I would consider using REST and hypermedia is for the open web, 100%, right? You can do it internally if you need to, and it's what people will reach for, and it's not going to be bad. It'll work, obviously, provably. It works for millions of people. But you're saying, why do I need to use hypermedia? And I'm saying, if you're going to do REST, you might as well do it right. And that brings us to the first question, which is, do you need to do REST? Maybe not. There are alternatives. And we'll talk about some of those, maybe today, maybe even tomorrow. We're already an hour and 36 minutes into this, but let's talk about hypermedia. Let's see. I'll take a sip of my coffee now. Oh, good. Hey, I'm so sorry. Great. I'm glad. Thank you. I'm so glad. Okay, so let's talk about hypermedia. So we opened up the build here. Idea pom.xml. Now, we're not going to be able to reproduce everything that Oliver is doing in this amazing example. By the way, it's not just Oliver. This has been built, he started it, but it's been contributed to by countless numbers of people over the years, right? This project is old. It's as old as Spring Hypermedia, which is probably more than 10 years old now, right? So let's see what the 312 commits. I wonder when the first one was. Let's see, older. 2015, 2014, 2013, 2012. There you go. Initial commit, 2012. So yeah, this is more than a decade old, this example, right? This Spring RESTbugs. So it has grown considerably with the Spring Hypermedia project. And it is such a cool looking example, to learn how to write good quality, clean code. I definitely recommend that you take a look at this. So here's our Spring Boot application. It's called RESTbugs. You should have a class like that. Let's see. Query provider. Do I want to do that? No. Let's see. Native configuration. Oh wow. He's even got GraalVM native hints for Spring Boot 3. That's so cool. That's awesome. I should let's see. Okay, so HAL forms configuration. Do we need that right now? Modal processor. Just want a very simple example because the API might have changed. I kind of remember how to do it. Payment configuration, map of, payments controller. Here we go. Response entity, submit payments. Payment links is payment. So we got this links class, which has the URLs, helper component to create links for the payment and receipt. Okay. Create the entity. We're injecting entity links, link payment, blah, blah, blah. Okay. RESTbugs. Oops. All right. Payment links, payment order process. Let's see. Payment configuration. Mixins. I don't need that. This is for JSON controller. Let's try this one. So here's a link. Here's an endpoint for a put. If the order ID is null or the order is paid, then of course we don't need to process it because it's already been found. Otherwise, we create a response entity with the URL, and the body is going to be the model, the payment model. Well, this looks pretty standard, right? There's nothing special about that. Exposes resources for payment. Okay. So we're going to handle controls or handle requests for the payment type, and then we got the payment link for item resource, and the resource is order. Okay, / payment or receipt with rel this. So we're creating links, and these links get used where? Let's find out. find usages of this. Go away. Stop helping. Okay. Payment order model processor. So this is the thing that gets you the entity model. What is this entity model business here? Oh, wow. So it's a thing that returns. Okay, so it's a component that implements representation model processor for entity models of order. Okay. And so oh, this did change a little bit, but it's the same basic idea. When somebody deals with a order, this gets involved, and your job is to wrap the order with links, it looks like. So you're creating a model. When does this mapper get used? Okay. When does this get used? Mapper. Oh, this mapper is right here. Map link if, add if, order is paid, get payment link, order is ready, get receipt link. Okay, looks like that's how we're going to do it. Okay, so we'll start with that. There's probably even a guide for this stuff. Okay, and so hypermedia or not. Hypermedia as the engine of application state. There you go. Okay, let's see what this looks like. So we're going to go through this guide today, my friends, just so you can kind of understand, because I don't do this very often because, you know, reasons. Let's see, got Spring Boot 3.0, great. Create a resource representation. This is kind of, this looks right. So where's my representation model? That's this thing right here. I've got a greeting, which extends a representation model. So we're going to create that here. Where's our code? We'll go here and we'll create a customer representational model. Okay. Oh, it's greeting. Oh, okay. So create a, okay, representation. So to model the greeting representation, create a resource representation class. As the links property is a fundamental property of the representation model, Spring Hypermedia ships with a base class called representation model that lets you add instances of link and ensures that they are rendered as shown earlier. So we're going to create this extends representational model of customer. Is that right? Why does it fail? What did we do the greeting here to make that change? Greeting is, where's our entity? Greeting. Oh, that's weird. Okay, there you go. So that's, okay, we don't need this to be public. Public is bad. We need a constructor for the payload itself. So we don't need a greeting, we just need a constructor though. So constructor, and it'll be the JSON creator, I guess. JSON creator to tell it how to create this resource. Well, I don't think we have anything special here, but we're going to return the name, JSON parameter, property name, string name, JSON property ID, integer ID, and we'll have two fields. So private final string name, okay, and private final integer ID. Okay, so we got that. So now we say this dot ID equals ID, this dot name equals name. Good. So there's our custom hypermedia records. And we want to get these fields, okay? So we'll say create some getters for those two. Great. Okay, seems like we did that part. Create a REST controller. So we have the REST controller. We're going to do so with hypermedia. So here we go. That looks better. So let's just copy and paste this, and we'll kind of make it work correctly. So here is our HTTP entity of a collection of customers. Oh dear. So I guess we could try with just a single customer first, huh? Let's just try that before we fix that other endpoint. We're kind of like in lost territory here. So customers ID, HTTP entity of customer representation model, customer by ID, path variable integer ID, and return new response entity dot, and we're going to pass in the customer data there. So we'll say whatever. Do we have a by ID endpoint? I think we must, right? So let's just use the service now. I think it's time to take advantage of that. We'll inject our service, customer service, inject that into this. We don't need the event listener anymore. Don't need that. Inject it. Okay, and we'll say equals this dot customer service dot by ID, passing in the ID like so. So we're going to create a response entity, HTTP status OK, and we're going to create a var customer representational model equals new customer representational model, passing in customer.name, customer.id, and we return that. So representational model, and then what? Yeah, Pierogi is amazing. Absolutely. I love Pierogi. Yeah, good stuff. Let's see. So got the customer representation model, and we want to add links. So all we've done is we've described our payload, and we're wrapping it in an envelope. But again, that's not very useful to people who are using an endpoint. What we want to do is provide links so that people know where to go and what is possible. So we're going to add a link by just adding it. So customer representation model, add, and we're going to say, I want to create a link to, okay, to, and this is type safe. I love that about this. This is a type safe way. Let me see, yeah, this one, to build a link to something. Okay, so method on, it's like a Makito kind of. So I'm going to use the customer HTTP controller class. I'm going to invoke the endpoint that we're trying to get, right? So we're going to say, call that endpoint with self-rel, with rel, and we're just going to call that customers. Okay, so I'm building a link there. You can actually, whoops, I don't need that. I need this. Here's the link object, right? So I'm going to add this object to the links that are supported by this endpoint. So I'm going to add another one. I'll say customer represent add. And then you have these like conditions. You can say add if this is true. And so you don't want to add links that no longer apply. If you've already got, if you don't have if you've already deleted a record, then there's no reason to show a link to delete it because it's already deleted. It'll be 404, right? So you can say if the record is deleted or whatever, or if the shopping cart has already been emptied, or if there's nothing in the shopping, like imagine you go to Amazon's API. If they built an API, you go to Amazon.com, you go to API.amazon.com/cart. Well, if you've got nothing in the cart, then there's no way to check out because you can't check out if there's nothing to pay for, right? So you can have a Boolean here saying add the link if the cart is not empty, okay? Or add a link if the cart hasn't already been checked out. If you've already paid for everything, then there's no reason to pay for it again. So there's no reason to show a link, etc. So we're going to just add another link here, and we're going to say link to method on customer HTTP controller dot by ID, right? And actually, I wonder if I can do, there you go, ID. That's my with self-rel. Okay, so I'm going to say the current URL that you're looking at right now is this one. That's the link that we should be at right now. Okay, so let's go ahead and try this out. I don't know if this will work. I haven't done this in a while. The basics are the same, but things are a little different. This that customer service. Oh, we're doing this one right here. This is incorrect. This is just regular HTTP. We're trying to make hypermedia work with just this endpoint. Okay. So localhost 8080 customers 1. Haha, look at that. Neat, huh? So that gives me, it says, hey, if you want to look at all the customers, it's this one right here. Actually, it's not even, this should be just called with rel. There you go. Give it a human readable name. There you go. So if I want to look at all the customers, I go here, right? If I want to look at a particular customer, which is what I'm looking at right now, if I want to look at myself, I go to the self link. So now imagine you're a JavaScript client, okay? And, I want to look at related information. I can build another endpoint called just customers, and that's what we're going to try and figure out next. Let's try that. We're going to try that out right now, but I don't know if it'll work. I don't know how to do it yet. It's been a while. Like this whole creating a model thing, do I need to do that, or can I just wrap an existing type with that? I think I can just wrap it, right? So let me just see. Let's go check out the guide. Hey, Ashkan, I'm so glad that you're enjoying yourself. I'm glad you're learning something from it. I hope you're enjoying. Join us every day, or as much as possible. I'll be here as much as I can this year and next year, and forever, as long as there's somebody to talk to. Learning and exploring and teaching. Okay, so we created our own custom controller type. We created our own custom representation, but I don't really want to. I want to wrap. There's got to be a way to wrap an existing payload with that data, and there used to be. Let me see. Isn't there? I feel like that should be. There should be a. Let me see this type. Go up here. Representational model. Initialize link. Oliver Girk. Oh, so that's the old name. He's now Oliver Dropbomb, but it's the same person. There you go. Representation model of this. So you can pass in a custom entity and just build it up that way. That's what I used to do. That's familiar. Okay, so in theory, we could just get rid of this. We don't really need this. Unless you have like custom serialization that you need to do, I wouldn't do this. So I'm going to get rid of that type for now. Okay. Well, yeah, I'm not going to delete it yet. Let's try. First of all, for my friend Ahmed, who's hopefully going to do some git surgery on this. Git commit customers with hypermedia git push. All right. Oh, thanks, Jonathan. I appreciate that. I appreciate it. Thanks for joining. I'm glad you're getting something out of it today. I'm glad you're all here. Okay, so by the way, for people who are just joining, this code is here as always. I'm doing these streams primarily on YouTube, and the code is going here, and we're looking at Spring Boot 3, and we're doing just a roving tour of the big pieces. So today we're talking about web program. We're not even talking about all of it. We can't talk about all of it. There's definitely going to have to be a part 2. Part 4 will actually be part 2 of our exploration of the web programming in Spring Boot. Okay. Good. So we've got this. We've got this representation model of a customer. See if I can make this work. Customer. And what's the issue there? What is this supposed to be? This is supposed to be a T, representation model of T. Does T extend represent? Oh, it does. Oh, that's weird. No, that doesn't work at all then. So that's a static representation. There's got to be a way to just create a wrapper around a given thing. Let's see here. Here's the representation model. Representation. Wasn't there like a way to do this before? Like, I don't want to have to create a new representation each time. That seems overkill. Maybe it is the right thing to do now, though. So I don't know. So payment links, payment controller. Here's my controller. Response entity created payment URI, body is the model, and this model is a payment model. So it's a payment controller, payment model. Yeah, payment model, that's this thing right here. Extends representation model. Oh, really? So we're just creating a data and, okay, call super. So we have getters and setters. So I guess the data is, so that's not so bad, I guess. I mean, okay, so let's try this again. We'll do it again. It's not that bad. Maybe I'm just being a baby. So let's see here. So static class customer customer model extends a representation model of customer model. That part I will never get used to. And we want required args constructor data. Okay, and we want to have some fields here. So private final customer. All right. Customer. So maybe that's all I need. Required args. What is this? Generate without a call. If this, even though this class does not extend to if this, no, I want call super data. Wait, what? Add what? Add call super to your type. To what type? Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Good. So we're going to return. What's this customer model? I guess. Okay, so basically that's cleaner. That is nicer. We're using Lombok. Lombok makes the medicine go down very easily, very nicely. Okay, so we're returning response and by the way, there's a static builder here, response entity.OK, passing in that, and we don't need to specify the status code. The question then is customer model. That seems better, and that means we can delete that full class that we created earlier because it looks like we don't need it. So let's get rid of that. Here, let's restart. We should have the same thing as we had before, just a lot less code. It's in line, it's in place. There you go. So there's my customer data, the ID, the name, etc., the links. All that is basically the same. Instead of having ID and name as the top level thing, though, I'm having the customer, which is fine for me. I don't know about you. What about customers? Okay, this seems easy enough. So we're going to create a static class customers model, extends representational model of customers, plural, private final collection of customer. Okay, and same thing as before. We'll have these three annotations here to make it short work. In Kotlin, you could basically write this code and you wouldn't need these annotations and it would be just as clean. But okay, so we're going to create another endpoint here. And we're going to just say, give me all the customers. Okay, and we don't need this anymore. And the customers endpoint, we'll just return all of the customers. So we're going to say all, passing in that new customers model, passing in the customers. Okay. Ready? And we're going to say, okay, for the customers controller, this should be with rel self because we're calling ourself basically this URL. That this endpoint serves all the data. It's called customers, but it's also self. So we can add this one. We can say, okay, add that directly. We don't need that separate link. Otherwise, we want the customer service. Do we want to call the endpoint customer HTTP controller by ID? Okay. And let's see, we want customers model. I think that should work. Okay, let's try this. Fingers crossed. That one works. Oops, that one is broken now. What do I do? Oh, it's be by ID on the local one. Customers. Oh, I refactored so dumb. I refactored my code and I forgot to like duplicate it. Okay, so customers by ID. We'll just rebuild it. Not a big deal. Integer ID, by ID, and here's back to customer, singular, right? By ID, passing in this ID. That's this one. And we're going to call this by ID, passing in null with rel customers by ID, I guess. Okay, customers model. And we want the singular customer. Everything happy? So on this endpoint, by ID, we're going to say ID, all right? So we get the single customer. We pass in the customer model. We're going to create links on the customer model for all the customers. That's going to be with rel customers. And then we'll have a link to the current URL, which is the ID, the endpoint by ID. Otherwise, we're going to get all the customers over here, and that'll be customers with self, and otherwise we'll have a link for get by ID, okay? Thank you. I'm so glad we sorted that out. Okay, so there's one customer at a time, good. And if I go to customers, I get all the customers. There we go. So, and you can see we have the link to, we can say this is a templated URL. You can go here. Notice that I passed in null, but it knows that that's a templated URL. So it knows that the client needs to substitute curly bracket ID, curly bracket, and then make that call to get a particular URL, okay? Isn't that convenient, right? Like, and also, since this is REST, it's hypermedia, we know that this URL and that URL, if you go to that endpoint, it should, here's the customer's endpoint, but if I go to this endpoint and I pass in a proper ID, right, I should have the detail. I have more links here. We also know that I can use the verbs. You can, you'll probably get in the HTTP response, you'll probably get the ability to understand what headers to use. Like you can do delete or post or whatever. So, okay. You know what, my friends? It's been a couple hours. I think we did a lot here today. Join me next time. Join me tomorrow. We'll have some more fun. We're going to continue our journey. We looked at REST. We looked at MVC. We looked at HTTP JSON. We looked at MVC, the basics, the engine of Spring MVC. We looked at how to create server-side rendered templates with Timeleaf and Mustache and all that. We looked at building REST, sort of HTTP APIs. Then we looked at REST, actual REST, hypermedia. And we haven't even done everything we could do here. It's possible to centralize all this link building logic in a single place so that, whenever you represent a customer, it automatically adds those links. You don't have to build it up inside the controller handler method as we're doing here. We'll explore some of that tomorrow. We'll look at, maybe we'll get to GraphQL tomorrow. That could be fun. Either way, tune in tomorrow. Thanks again, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful day wherever you are in the world. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you.